Once you start digging into this, it becomes clear that there is no evidence for the speculated spinning ball that we supposedly live on, and everything points to a flat Earth. The flat Earth is much more than just reasonable. The one and only reason that it's reasonable to argue against the flat Earth is that we've all been taught otherwise our whole lives. We blindly believe something that A, has never been proven, and B, is pretty much fucking impossible.
But remember, Nick, you were the one who came looking for me.
So you might want to ask yourself, did I find what I was looking for?
Those of you who think this technical difficulty was planned and think I'm scamming you, go do it for yourself. Because you're going to find the exact same thing. I got nothing to hide here. This is live on the air, okay? I'm going to zoom in on the Earth in Photoshop. Can you see the Earth? To image, adjust, levels, and I'm going to bring the levels over here. And I'm going to bring the levels up. Uh-oh. What is that? Why is there a square box around the Earth?
What are some of the basic observations someone can make to ascertain that the Earth is neither a globe or spinning?
We've been taught that we're on a ball spinning around the sun, and so to hear that you might be on a flat plane, motionless at the center of the universe with all the celestial bodies spinning around you, just as it appears, actually comes as a surprise. But it shouldn't, because our eyes, experience, and common sense all tell us that the horizon is perfectly flat, and we feel motionless. We don't hear ourselves whizzing by at thousands of miles per hour. No matter how high amateur rockets or balloons have gone up, the horizon rises to the eye of the observer all the way up, and that's only consistent with a flat plane. Their theory just gets more and more wild as time has gone on. And so, yeah, it began with the spinning Earth going 1,000 miles per hour, which is then circling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, which then they decided the sun wasn't a heliocentric model, but more of an acentric model, where they don't know where the center is, and we're just exploding out of a big bang. So the sun, we're spinning around the sun, and then the sun and us are spinning around the Milky Way galaxy, they say, at 500,000 miles per hour. And then the entire Milky Way galaxy, they say, is shooting off from the Big Bang at 670 million miles per hour, almost the speed of light. So there's at least 4 rip-raging, contradictory motions supposedly going at all times, yet you don't experience any of it, nor can you measure any of it using the stars. The flat motionless Earth, not only is it the greatest conspiracy of all, it's also the easiest to prove. I mean, it just is flat and motionless, just as it appears. Look into it more and more, make it a thing to try and debunk it, if you will. You know, even if you want to do it that way. Negative reinforcement works too. Try as you will, you're only going to find proofs for the flat motionless Earth. You're not going to confirm that you're on a spinning ball.
Welcome. The curvature of the Earth eludes us. Either the Earth is much larger in circumference than we are told, or the curve just doesn't exist. People assume that there is a curve, but it's never really been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Cameras with fisheye lenses, Hollywood movies, and NASA CGI are the closest we get to seeing curvature.
The deception and the lies are just so pervasive, and they're just so deep that I swear it gives me a headache.
The surface of water is always level. This is just natural physics. We know this, that water, if unobstructed and uncontained, will flow outwards, finding it the easiest course to maintain its own level, right? So, but the Ball Earth model claims that the oceans are huge 100-mile walls of curved water curving around the ball. That's ridiculous.
No, I just want to stand on top of the wall and piss off the edge of the world.
Lighthouses are one great example. The Isle of Wight Lighthouse in England, it's 180 feet high and can be seen up to 42 miles away, a distance at which modern astronomers say the light should fall 996 feet below the line of sight. Why can you still see it? Another one worth mentioning that people be familiar with is the Statue of Liberty. It stands 326 feet above sea level, and on a clear day can be seen as far as 60 miles away. Now, if the Earth was a globe at the dimensions that they give us, that would put Lady Liberty at an impossible 2,074 feet below the horizon.
No, not one picture of the Earth. Imagine that. 2016, and we still don't have a picture of our home. Thousands of satellites supposedly orbiting the Earth. Why can't we get thousands of pictures? One shot with the whole Earth in it. Hell, we should have a channel on cable that shows the Earth rotating 24 hours a day, every day. Nope. Let's listen to NASA's very own Robert Simon talk about how we get our fake pictures of Earth.
In 1972, we saw our home in a new way. Apollo 17 astronauts snapped this picture.
It gave people the first look at their home planet as a single entity.
Last week, scientists at NASA released this. The shot is compiled from data from NASA's VEERS instrument, which orbits the Earth about every 100 minutes, taking measurements of light coming off the planet. That can be translated into ribbons of imagery like this, and then into one of these. And this is just the latest in NASA's Earth from Space album, which may be one of the most mind-expanding collections of images in human history. Then in 2002, Blue Marble 2.0, NASA's Rob Simon made this. Simon's job is...
It's primarily taking data and making pictures out of it.
That's what this is, a composite of data sets from several different instruments translated into a picture.
So we actually had to take clouds out.
They stashed the clouds for later, went onto the ocean. That came from an instrument that measures phytoplankton in the sea.
Where it was low, I colored it dark blue because they're low mostly in mid-oceans. And then where it was a little bit higher, it was like a little bit brighter green.
Then add the clouds back in.
There's a small problem with it because there's a very slight gap in between each orbit.
So some of those are painted on.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Then
there was another layer to sort of simulate the atmosphere.
And then there's this little bright spot.
It's called the specular highlight. So it's the reflection of sunlight off of water.
Those are the pieces, but you can't just slap them all together.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat, or the clouds are sort of too see-through. So I just hit Command Z a lot.
There's artistry to creating the world.
What I imagine it to be. Unfortunately, I'm not an astronaut. I've never been to space. But I've looked at these images over and over again, trying to sort of get the essence of it. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be. It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
Excuse me, I'm allergic to bullshit. Not having one authentic picture of the Earth alone is a huge red flag.
Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Coming this June, last summer's #1 show returns Under the Dome.
Do you know how to fly those?
Absolutely. Do you get to fly to the edge?
Oh, yeah.
What's past there?
Don't know. We're not allowed to fly past that.
The flat Earth model is a working model. It's by no means definitive due to the nature of this massive cover-up. For the past 500 years, we've been completely buying into the Copernicus heliocentric model, but what we do know about the flat Earth is based on the azimuthal equidistant map that seems to be working out. This map goes as far back as the year 1000 and possibly earlier, now used as an official map by the US Geological Survey and also as the official logo for the United Nations. Is this our real home being hidden from us in plain sight? I think it is. The first thing a lot of people say is, where's the edge? Well, look at this map where Antarctica is a 360-degree ice barrier that holds the water in. These ice walls are real, and they stand 150 feet above the surface of the water. Then you need to understand that there is no independent access to Antarctica. Average people can only go there on a guided tour. It has no towns, no cities, and no permanent residences. What's past the 150-foot ice wall is anyone's guess. How far the ice extends, how it terminates, and what exists beyond it. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by 12 nations and more later on, states that Antarctica is for peaceful purposes only. No military activities, just scientific research and government exploration. Expeditions by any party must be discussed in advance. It's the longest and most successful treaty between nations. The treaty also states that there are ships, stations, and equipment to ensure compliance of the treaty. Sounds like military activity to me. Anyway, so this azimuthal equidistant map appears to be correct for the most part.
Who are you?
The giver. When the elders need guidance, I provide wisdom using memories of the past. Our world was different. There was more.
More?
Much more.
A big issue I was having with the flat Earth for the longest time was the sunrise and sunsets. I realized that it was a perspective issue. First, you must understand that the sun is not 93 million miles away. If it was, we would never see anything like this here. This is concentrated because it's closer. It's much more probable that the sun is only a few thousand miles away and that it's the same size as the moon. Once you comprehend this, all of the sudden, solar eclipses make sense. So the sun is close, which gives it the ability to spotlight the area that it's over, and when it leaves your view, due to perspective, it takes the light with it. There is a generous amount of light where the sun is at, but since it's so close, it doesn't spread its light like it would if it were bigger and further. The sun circumnavigates the Earth like a huge clockwork. Sometimes that takes a while to sink in. Alright, let's talk about the Coriolis effect. The Coriolis effect states that when a moving object leaves the ground, the Earth continues to rotate, meaning that when shooting a gun at a certain distance, the bullet would be a little off due to the Earth's rotation. If that's the case, then airplanes would have to account for the Coriolis effect, but they don't. This is only a few things that work better on a flat, motionless Earth. Do you need 100 excuses as to why you're not feeling any motion or seeing any curvature? Are those excuses easier to believe? Or is it easier to use Occam's razor and go with what our senses are telling us?
1,500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was the center of the universe. 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat.
This one's hard to get across to people big time, but outer space is up for debate. Space programs are compartmentalized, and most astronauts are Freemasons that have to swear an oath of secrecy when dealing with the so-called missions. The thing is that there is so much footage of NASA and other space agencies making mistakes. Sometimes we could see bubbles in the spacewalks. Sometimes we could see harnesses and wires on the people in the International Space Station. The permed hair that moves nothing like it would in zero gravity. These are huge red flags, not to mention the Van Allen radiation belt. The Van Allen radiation belt is a layer of energetic charged particles that is held in place around a magnetized planet such as Earth by the planet's magnetic field. Sounds kinda like a dome if there is one. Oddly enough, one of NASA's employees admitted that this radiation belt needs to be figured out before humans could pass through it. Listen closely.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Let's talk about satellites. We've already discussed how there are no pictures of the Earth, so are satellites even real? Not likely. Ground towers are built all over the world and are more than adequate to relay our television, radio, and cell phone service.
All GPS is done through land-based towers, and things like Google Earth are taken with high-altitude planes, and most of them are just done with cars on street level. Did you know that satellites were actually invented by Arthur C. Clarke, the science fiction author?
I didn't know that.
they shortly became science fact after that. The geostationary satellite, look it up. It was created by a science fiction author. And then within a decade, NASA claims to have sent a real one up there, and ever since then, that's where we get all our communications from.
So if satellites were real, we would constantly hear stories of them being hit by meteors or comets, and that doesn't happen. No one's ever lost their DirecTV feed during the Perseids meteor shower because one of the meteors knocked out one of the satellites. It doesn't happen, it's never happened, and it won't happen.
Douglas.
Yeah,
Look, I can explain.
I know the truth.
Where are you?
You could call it the end of the world.
So you may or may not have heard the term cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when new information challenges your beliefs and you just can't let go. It's just like that scene in The Matrix.
No. I don't believe it. It's not possible. Stop. Let me out! Let me out! I want out!
We have a rule. We never free a mind once it's reached a certain age.
It's not easy going through this kind of deception and then realizing that your whole life was spent thinking and believing one thing when it's the opposite. Nobody wants to feel like they've been fooled, like they've been had. I'm a human just like you, and I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that I'd be on this kind of journey. This journey of realization and reckoning. This journey of putting everything I know to the side so I can absorb information that seems ridiculous, yet so sensible. It's time to say fuck it. It's not your fault that you were wrong. It's not your fault that you fell for a trick that the whole world also fell for. I'm right here with you. It's time to take down your mental barrier and recognize that we have a lot of work to do in order to find out what this place really is and why we're here. It's not to be slaves of the dollar. It's not to be slaves of the clock. Our reality is being manipulated and hidden from us. Please wake up and try to awaken those around you.
What would any of you be willing to do? Would you brave the weird and haunted shores at World's End?
So how did this happen? Okay, let's start in the classroom. The first time anybody enters a school classroom, they are introduced to the globe model of the Earth. This three-dimensional scale model of the Earth that has never been proven was invented in the 1400s. Fast forward to 1927, a big-budget movie company called Universal Pictures came out with its movie intro, and guess what? The spinning ball Earth still hasn't been proven. This is 30 years before NASA was founded. Over the years, Universal kept coming out with similar logo intros, and to this day, we see the spinning ball Earth before many of the movies that we watch. Besides, there are countless movies about outer space that use the same model. We have been indoctrinated, and it's as simple as that. For the spherical Earth to remain unproven after this long is a wake-up call to everybody that lives here. We need to shed this programming right here, right now, and find out what the fuck is going on. No more embracing this sick illusion that was created by psychopaths. I'm going to keep searching for answers and trying to make something happen. All I want to know is, who's coming with me?
Of the Flat Earth Society.
I'd like to be an explorer, like the
Great Magellan.
Oh, you're too late. There's really nothing left to explore.
Really, the evidence shows me that it's flat and stationary. There is much more evidence based on just pure analysis that it's flat and stationary.
So it's not actually a sphere, it's oblate, and officially it's an oblate spheroid. That's what we call it. But not only that, it's slightly wider below the equator than above the equator.
A little chubbier.
A little chubbier.
Yeah.
Chubby's a good way. It's like pear-shaped.
Lack of critical thinking and lack of free thinking. We really are in big trouble. We need to step it up as far as the awakening goes. You really need to put your thinking cap on, and you really need to start to look at these things and look at them with a critical eye and with a critical mind.
There's a lot of people who've been studying this flat Earth thing on their own. It's the only way you can do it. You sort of get the books out, get the internet out, and you sort of study it. You look at the ball, and you work it out, And a lot of people have had a big awakening, a big realization, a big change in their frequency. I mean, it is big. It's like space doesn't exist anymore. The planets, this infinite universe, infinite space, big stars, big suns, this has all been smashed up. Because the awakening is because being lied to, it sucks, It's a big lie. No one likes being lied to. It's like you've uncovered something, you've exposed something. You've got an amazing quote, I really like this. Most of the flat earthers don't even know it's flat. They're content with believing. This is true. There's a lot of flat earthers who just believe it's flat. They sort of look at the numbers. They haven't really caught the wave, because the awakening, the realization of flat earth is a big internal wave. And if you don't catch it, you've probably missed it.
I came up and the question that kept going in my mind, it's like, okay, when did it become a globe? And that's the question I put to everybody, including the people that are listening now. It's like, when did you know you were on a globe? How do you know you are where you think you are? And it usually comes down to two answers. The first is always the same. It's like, well, we know because we know. Duh. You know, we've known since we were in first grade. And I said, well, just because you have a globe put in your classroom, in the corner of your classroom when you're in first grade, and you've been staring at it ever since you've been in school, and depending on when you left school, you know, it was always there. Is that why you believe in it? And then they come back and they say, well, no, NASA told us. And I say, well, that's good and all, but NASA is a military wing of the United States government. And that's you're putting a lot of faith in these guys to tell you absolutely everything is true. Let's say 500 years ago, it was announced that we were living on a globe spinning around the sun was flying through space, and the Milky Way galaxy, and galaxies, you know, all this stuff. Let's say they couldn't prove that until they flew up high enough to take the picture in 1956, 1957, 1958, depending on when you're looking at it. If they were wrong, and it didn't look like what all the science books said, would they tell anybody? And that's, you know, the story just branches off from there, and that's where we are now. From all the research I've done, everything that I've looked into, it appears that the United States government and the Russians, who have been hand in hand on this, figured out that when they went out to Antarctica, which should just be this continent, it looks, you know, approximately a little bit larger than Australia, really wasn't a continent at all, that it was just this giant endless field of ice. And there could be a border at the end of that ice, and that border extends all the way around us, and that we're not on a globe, that it's flat. And they decided to keep it a secret ever since 1956, and they've been doing a wonderful job of it over the last almost 60 years, but it's starting to fall apart now. And that's why when you type in, you don't even have to type in my stuff, you just type in flat earth into YouTube or Google or any search engine that you want, there's this huge movement that's been really taking hold since January, and it's questioning where we are now.
I know they're making moves, we're making moves, and I'm hoping our moves are eventually going to get enough people, you know, I don't know, foot soldiers on the ground or something, flat earthers, to make a change in society. What do you theorize could happen potentially if all the work you do and all the work all the other flat earthers are doing, whether they make videos or not, gets critical mass? What do you think is going to happen?
I just want to know what's out there. You know, that's my whole thing. I think if we get enough people curious about it, I mean, people are so darn curious about the unknown. And there's literally an unknown, as far as we can tell. There's a big, big unknown just, a few thousand miles south in any direction.
Once you have this, go through the washing machine, this realization, I mean, it's an inner thing. It's an inner journey. Especially men, again, they're after the hard rationale and the numbers only. I mean, the numbers these things are required. The rationale is required. But it's really left less than 50% of the realization. I mean, how does one look at things now after they know it's flat? Do people look at things differently? Do people contemplate things differently? Do people spend time alone in nature with a new sense of childlike wonder? Because if you just look at the numbers and yeah, it's flat and nothing changes inside you, then there's no real fucking point.
It's a 20,000-foot sheer wall of ice, but that's never stopped me before.
9/11 was an inside job. Vaccines will kill your kids. GMO equals death. Evolution is a lie. Big Bang is a big hoax. Dinosaurs never existed. Psychedelics show you truth. Governments are evil. Bush, Trump, Clinton, all the same. Elections are rigged. False flags are real. If you have cancer, someone is murdering you. Cannabis kills cancer. You can see unconditional love in a dog's eyes, but not in a human's. We are all one. Satan runs the world. The earth is flat. There's a dome above your head. The truth does hurt. The moon has its own light. Fukushima was a hoax. CERN is evil. Israel is a terrorist state. Abortion is murder. God is real. Wikipedia is a lie. You are a slave. 90% of us are asleep. Your TV is watching you. The truth is out there. This video should go viral, but it won't. You are love. Have no fear.
Abduction by aliens.